to 3 million rads. That is full of cobalt-60 or cesium-137. And what it does is it actually destroys the ability for the seeds within that produce to be able to reproduce. So it alters and it damages the DNA. They use this to prevent spoilage. And, really, it's really just all about money. It's all about money. It's about growing it all with chemicals, irradiating it so that it can sit longer on the shelf and have a better chance of everything being sold. I mean, we've all gone into the store and purchased, bought oranges, and yeah, they look like oranges and they smell like oranges. Then you take them home and you cut them in half, and it's like, here is this dried out, fibrous, tasteless mess that just ends up going in the bucket. And this is why I really, really encourage you to purchase everything organic. And if you get somebody in the heartland of the country and you get someone knocking on the door with beautiful, beautiful produce that has been delivered directly from Florida or from California, you do want to buy some of that. That's where you're really going to get an orange or a grapefruit, and and it tastes, and that's what it is. The other thing, another purpose of this really is to help the Department of Energy rid itself of its burden of radioactive waste materials from the nuclear weapon production by leasing it to the irradiation facilities. At prescribed doses, the food does not, they say that it does not become radioactive unless the equipment is improperly calibrated or poorly monitored or malfunctioning. But what it does to the molecular structure, it completely alters it. Gamma rays knock electrons out of orbit. This initiates a series of chemical reactions in the food. The process is very different from microwave cooking. Microwaves, I don't use those either. Can't stand them. I don't think any kitchen should have them. Take the time and heat it up in a stainless steel pan or bake it or broil it. But they insist, the FDA insists that microwaves do not pose enough energy to alter the molecules of the food. So what happens nutritionally with the quality of the food subjected to this radiation? The effects are well summarized in publications entitled Food Irradiation, Issues and Answers for Elected Officials. It states that exposure of any food to gamma or ionizing radiation produces uncharacteristic effects on nutrients. Essential nutrients such as fat-soluble vitamins, which are your vitamin A and E and K, water-soluble vitamins, your vitamin C and your B-complex, folic acid, essential amino acids, cysteine, methionine, histidine, tryptophan, nucleic acids, and enzymes. They are depleted or destroyed. Furthermore, unsaturated fatty acids are converted to toxic lipids. You hear me? Toxic lipids. And those are, the fatty acids. And we're wondering why the number one cause of death in the United States is heart disease. I mean, come on. In the Mediterranean, they have the island of Crete has the lowest incidence of heart disease in the world. In the Mediterranean diet, all of the fresh produce, a lot of fish. One thing that their diet is high and richly saturated with is organic olive oil. So get some olive oil into your diet. Quit using things like corn oil and lard, margarine, the shortenings that are absolutely health destroying. You need to add olive oil, grapeseed oil. There's different levels of olive oil. You can get the heavier oil that will withstand a higher temperature, so that you can use that. There's something to say, Rick? Got a question here.
I do have a question. You were talking about margarine. Now, is it not a fact that margarine or oleo is like one chemical away from being plastic?
That's true. It is one chemical removed from being labeled as plastic.
Ew.
So you stop and think about, if you're ingesting plastic, where do you think all this stuff's going to go in the body? I mean, come on. You keep taking this in. The brain keeps saying, okay, you keep putting this into the body. I don't know what to do with it, so I'll store it. I'm going to store it off over here. These types of fats that are rancid, that are destroyed, that are one chemical removed from plastic, they all start lining the inside of the veins of the cardiovascular system. It's just like I mentioned with, even dairy products. Dairy products, the pasteurization process creates what's called an exoenzyme. And that exoenzyme, when it gets into the cardiovascular system, it creates like barnacles. I mean, have you ever seen barnacles on a boat?
Oh, yes.
Yeah. Okay, so it creates all these little barnacles throughout the cardiovascular system. And then when you eat things like, peanut oil and lard, margarine, corn oils, they're all GMO. Sorry. They have no place in your kitchen. They do not belong in your pantry. When you take those in, what happens is they start sticking to those little barnacles. So what you need to use is krill oil or salmon oil or good quality fish oils in order to emulsify that, to liquefy that, to break that down, to carry that out of the body. So if you're going to have, if you can find somebody who's got a herd of goats, I don't care if you got to go buy that gallon of milk and tell them that you're feeding them to a new litter of puppies. That milk is absolutely the closest to human milk. And it is absolutely wonderful if they know what they're doing, if they're feeding the goat properly, if they're milking the goat and cooling that milk down and not putting a lid on that jar until it is completely cooled down. When you milk the goat and that milk is warm and then you put a lid on it and put it in the refrigerator to cool it down, it kind of traps the taste of goat, and it does not taste good. My friends that raise goats, and I have a wonderful close friend in western Nebraska with quite a herd of goats, and she's the one that makes all of the skincare products with goat milk. Her goat milk is delicious. I have a friend down in Arkansas who had a good size goat farm in Missouri when I lived down there, and we used gallons of goat milk a week. My grandchildren were raised with it. My son Danny, who's 29, he would always, his whole life, as soon as I would get goat milk, he's 6'8" now, he'd open that refrigerator, he'd pull that lid off of that gallon of goat milk, and that kid, I can see him standing at the refrigerator at 12 years old at like 6'2", and opening the lid off of that goat milk, and that kid would stand there and he would drink a whole gallon of goat milk. And one thing I've got, and then I went to the sink to be washed. One thing I will say, he's never had a cavity. He has all of his teeth. And another thing, being 6'8", he never, ever, not once, ever had a growing pain. Never had a growing pain. And this kid would grow 6 inches in a year. and never had a growing pain. So it was the way he was raised. It was the food, that he was consuming, that he has really, really enjoyed wonderful, wonderful health. And he's lean and he's strong and very, very, he has an active job, and he is very active with sports. And yes, basketball, he plays flag football. At 10 years old, he was playing baseball at 10. One coach had tried to warm him up and ended up with a black and blue hand. And they were, the next week was the All-Star playoff. And, of course, Danny was in that. And Danny was always accustomed to coaches giving up 2, 3, 4 players to get Danny on their team. And then during the summer times, when even the older leagues would go on vacations, the coaches would call Danny's coach and want Danny to pitch for the team that was even a step up and older. And he was just, the child was born with, no matter where he's looking, it doesn't matter what ball is in his hand. And it doesn't matter even the golf, playing golf. If he's looking at a particular spot, that is exactly where the ball ends up going. And so this one coach who had a black and blue hand with the catcher's mitt on, his neighbor was a policeman. So that policeman showed up at the All-Star game and brought his radar gun. Danny's fastball at 10 years old was 85 miles per hour at 10. And, of course, at 10, I think, cut at 10, I think Danny was already like 5'8". So he never went through that problem at school where the girls were always taller than the boys. No, he was always a head taller than everybody. He was 3 feet 4 inches tall when he was 2. And that was my 100% herb baby. But so anyway, I do know that the foundation in the womb, the foundation that you feed your children, it is going to make the difference. He was never fed irradiated foods. He was not fed crop-dusted foods. He is accustomed to juicing. And what is really beautiful is I see this being repeated with his 2-year-old daughter. And very, very meticulous about what she eats. And my little 8-year-old granddaughter loves YouTube, and she loves to search things out on YouTube. And recently, she had a checkup. She had an eye surgery a year ago, and she had to go in to see the doctor, and she was at Children's Hospital. And when she was leaving, she noticed that there were some children about her age that were sitting out in the lobby area, and they all had their kind of Happy Meals. And my little granddaughter said, "Hang on one second." She went over to those children, and she was talking to them, and she was pointing at their food, and she kind of had that index finger out there and kind of going, the authority finger. And she told him, she says, "You need to go home and look this up on YouTube, and you'll find out what's in that food." And then when she came back over, she says, "Okay, I'm ready to go." And it was like, "What was that all about?" And she said, I couldn't just walk by and see what they were eating. They need to know what is in that food that they're eating. And I'll tell you what, I had to just chuckle. I mean, she's just a little carbon copy of her grandma. She's going to tell them whether they like it or not. It's like, don't be afraid to tell the truth. So, this is, I can't encourage you enough to go back to that first program and listen to everything that that I spent the time on the pH chart and where you need to be what kind of foods you need to be consuming, what things you need to be drinking, and like I